But if you have a concept, and if you can play with that as a concept, and if that concept can illuminate your mind, your awareness, your life. Hey guys, this is the second part of the Introduction to Spirituality video, a little bit of an introduction for people who are new, who are looking for some frames of reference, who are looking for some basic definitions, and I'll just pick up where the last one left off. So let's crack into it. I just want to offer some basic foundational advice, some framework that I think is just generally good advice for anybody in this sort of situation. And the first point would be, it is so extremely important for you as an individual to find really good, high quality resources of information. Now, this sounds reasonable, but it is much more difficult to come across than you would think. It is very exciting when you get into this layer of life and you're learning about, you're feeling the energy of your energy body, you're experiencing movements and the mechanics of the world at large. And that's really beautiful and really fantastic. But at the same time, when we are a newbie and we don't really know what we're doing yet, we can make choices that aren't necessarily aligned with some wisdom, so just some natural good choices within life, because we're lost to the excitement of it. And with that in mind, I think putting in the time, the effort, really vetting the people that you come across. I think when you come into this, it's a really good idea to try and find, a generalist, but then you also want to discover your own topics and areas of interest. So peppering your awareness with different sorts of information, different information resources, no matter what topic you find yourself on, trying to find 3 to 5 sources of information within that topic is a good number. If you're trying to look at, just one individual or one sort of information, you're really narrowing your focus and you're not giving yourself enough of a good grounding. Now, this is just a kind of a general overview. And I think anybody who has stepped into any new learning of any sort, particularly it's kind of this layer and level of things, can acknowledge that that's generally quite sound advice. But at the same time, what we have to acknowledge is that when we get into something and we really get into the alignment of that particular thing, we become absorbed by something. When we get into it first, we get excited, we want to learn all about it, we want to consume all the data. That is also a very natural layer and element of it. And if that's a stage that you're in or a stage that you're coming through, that's absolutely fine. It's very positive, but you just want to keep a little reference to yourself on the side that I'm in this right now, I'm in the crest of a wave, it's all coming together and that's really fantastic. But at some stage, that wave will, come to its fruition and other things will come in. So it's this concept of moving with the times in a very natural manner, and that we learn to kind of take on board this journey of, I came across something, I found it really interesting, I went through it as much as possible, and then other things came from that. And so it all unfolds. And this is what they mean often when they say, whoever they are, that, the journey just unfolds in front of you. As you walk through certain corridors of information, time, or experience, other things will be peppered and layered in your field. And it's the sort of thing as well, I would suggest, that we can't consciously chase. It's more something that we have to open up to and allow it to occur and allow it to come in. So again, no hard and fast rules, just a general observation that has value and I think is worth sharing. I think some of this preliminary stuff isn't shared or offered enough within the industry and within the field. And, if you get to know me, you'll probably find over time that I have a few issues with the spiritual industry as it sits in the world at this time. And I'll just highlight those so that you can be aware of them instead of it being a pitfall by not being aware of something, and you can lose a solid frame of reference or not have a solid frame of reference for quite a substantial period of time. Like not to know something very basic just because it hasn't been highlighted, showcased and shared with you, and then like a few years down the road you just think, gosh, I really wish I knew that at the beginning, like it would have saved a lot of time. Now the other side to this is, the understanding that, our journey is our journey and whatever is meant to be will be. And there's definitely that sort of mentality that we can bring to that. And that's a really lovely consideration to have. But at the same time, I think there are some general basic elements of things that can be highlighted, can be said, and therefore you don't have to go through the same level of suffering, of not knowing, or only half knowing when this information kind of could be easily available. So it's so important to find good resources. And something to highlight about the practitioners, individuals, people who are sharing their information or their knowledge or their wisdom, or people who are professional within their field and their area of discipline. One thing that I think is super important to highlight is that we're all just people. We're all just people in our own life, on our own path, doing our own thing. I think enough has been highlighted in general about the kind of guru culture. I think the concept of somebody being, a sort of generally regular sort of person, being a spiritual teacher is a little bit naff. But I think that, we can all be spiritual facilitators. And I think the concept of, we're all teachers to each other, that sounds like a very lofty concept, but I think in life we can often find that that's very true. You can learn from the people around you all the time, little things. And whether it's somebody coming into your path to give you the opportunity to learn to be more humble, or, one of those headfucky things that happens from time to time that you have to learn how to master those things, when you're on the path of awareness and when you're on the path of awakening consciousness, and when we're realizing that we're living in a world that is, potentially transitioning from a very unconscious, unawakened, egoic state of mentality and evolving into a more, aware, conscious, open, just good moral values and a more positive culture, and being co-creative and working together and surviving these times is, I suppose, the total summation of what all of this could be. Actually, there's something very grounding about the spiritual journey, and you realize the value that you can bring to life because it's the value that you bring to the world through yourself. And I think it's important to value the intelligence of every individual as well. We all have a pair of eyes inside our head, if you know what I mean, and we all have the eyes to see. And to value every person and their experience, to be able to appreciate that everybody who is not currently on the conscious journey or becoming self-aware or whatever, because it sounds naff, really, when you break it down and say it out loud. But those who aren't, they are suffering, suffering as this Buddhist concept, and which is actually quite useful. I really appreciate that within Buddhism, they actually acknowledge that suffering is a part of life, and that suffering is living out of harmony to some extent with a naturally fluid, interconnected core being that can flow within the moment happily and easily, regardless of what that moment brings. And perhaps that is the best that any of us can ask for, instead of asking for materialism and stuff, or living a certain way, or having a certain lifestyle. And what's the point of that? Is that actually fulfilling, or does the fulfillment come because, other people crave what we have? And this is the society and the culture that we're brought up in, and society upholds that culture. Society applauds that culture. So when you have masses of young people, the younger generations in the world today, who are never going to be able to achieve that, because not that the resources aren't there, but that the resources are stacked in a certain way and manner. It's a pyramid system, and the way that people achieve is because there's more people below than there is above. And some people get up the ladder and some people don't. And this is, to a certain extent, what we're dealing with. It's what we're living within. And I suppose that comes back to a lot of the Going Dotty principles, is about sharing the structure of yourself, your energetic body, your energetic form, how to be solid within yourself, how to build your energy body so that it becomes a solid membrane around you, as opposed to this conceptual thing that's fractured, that's lost all over the place, the geometry of ourselves, the symbology of ourselves in our world. We can always find ourselves, because wherever you go, there you are. And if you weren't here, your existence wouldn't be here either, and therefore nothing would be here for you to know. So this concept that, we can't, we can, we're just lost. And we're lost in such a myriad of externalized stuff that is placed almost purposefully in the way so that you can't find your own empowerment, so that you can't find your own illumination, so that you can't, walk on your own 2 feet and with the strength of your own back. And I suppose the other element of the illusion, or the rule of the Maya, the rule of the mainstream, what you're supposed to think, what you're supposed to say, what you're supposed to do, this concept of consciousness when it's operating within singularity, which is what occurs when we're operating within a binary system, which happens when we're living in a third dimensional state of consciousness. So whether this is real or not real, I suppose at this stage in time we can't really say. There isn't enough of a consensus about that in enough of a proportion of people, but there certainly is a language within the New Age movement, within the spirituality movement, or within the spiritual industry, within the conscious awareness movement. And, with structure comes the opportunity to be able to perceive. It doesn't really matter sometimes, I think, at this stage of the game, whether something is right or wrong. But if you have a concept, and if you can play with that as a concept, and if that concept can illuminate your mind, your awareness, your life, if it can make something easier to deal with, if it allows you to bring in another jigsaw piece of knowledge, data, comprehension, and then you can leave that concept because it no longer serves you, but it played its part along the way. I think this is a much more useful way in the modern Western world with the mental health situations that we have going on, rather than trying to be right or say, we all have a soul and this is how it is, or we all have, a third eye chakra and this is how it goes. If we can actually just loosen up from this a little bit, and instead of trying to force everybody to accept, that which it is we understand within the spiritual industry, and just throw it out there as information in a healthy manner and in a grounded manner so that people can access it, people can work with it as much as it works for them, and then they can drop it by the wayside as and when they need to, because this shouldn't be a burden. There's no right way to live. There's no absolute thing that you have to do. And I think a lot of that has been perpetuated within the spiritual scene over the last decade. And even though that might have served its purpose at that time, and I can't say that it didn't or it hasn't, but I certainly suggest that that's not really where we want to be moving from and moving forward at this present moment in time.